A very good evening to all our viewers streaming through. This is The Agenda, our brand new show here at Namibian Sun, where we discuss things as we see them. Tonight, I'm joined by the former Prime Minister of Namibia, Nahas Angula, and Dimbulukeni Nauyoma. He's an activist with the affirmative repositioning movement. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you particularly for agreeing to come, because people are scared to come to this show. People don't want to debate each other. People just want to, so you are the brave ones who have agreed to come. So thank you very much. Now,
no, we are civic citizens.
Civic citizens.
We are there all the time.
Very, very good. Very good. So tonight, I want us to discuss issues that align slightly to generational interest. And I'm reminded of a quote by Frantz Fanon that each generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. That's why, Tate Nahas, I'll start with you first, because we have Kassinga Day coming on Tuesday. On the 4th of May, 1978, as bombs were being thrown on the children, mothers, and everybody on that camp, where were you that day?
Well, that day, I was in New York. I was assigned by the SWAPO leadership to work with the United Nations Council for Namibia. And that particular day, the Security Council was actually debating how to implement Resolution 435. Mm-hmm. So that brazen and barbaric attack sabotaged the whole debate. Mm-hmm. President Nahas was there. He had, and his delegation, to depart back to Angola to go and attend to the situation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which was very critical. People needed evacuation. Yes. People needed medical care. People needed food. Yeah. Children were traumatized. And he had to leave New York to go back to Angola with his delegation.
Yes. So, again, a follow-up to that. How does Kassinga Day now today, how did it shape the struggle towards independence for Namibia eventually?
Well, in many ways. First of all, the youth at that time, they got angry inside the country, because at the same time there was also conscription going on. So many young people left the country to join the struggle abroad.
Yes. Therefore,
Strengthening the ranks of SWAPO abroad, and also the People's Liberation Army of Namibia. Secondly, international solidarity became intensified. And it is for that reason that the small island of the Republic of Cuba decided to establish 2 schools in that country, at the island of youth, to take care of these young people who were displaced, who were traumatized, to take them away from the danger situation.
Indeed.
And also, countries like former Yugoslavia took it upon themselves to accept the wounded and to treat them, to give them artificial limbs, and so on. So, in a way, it was a tragic event, but it also galvanized internal resistance and external solidarity.
Indeed. Thank you, former Prime Minister. Now, Dimbulukeni, you and I were not born in 1978 when these things happened, so I cannot ask where you were, where you were at that time. But you come from a different generation, a very a very enlightened generation that demands certain things to happen. And most of the time when people like yourselves, especially the activists like yourselves, when you demand certain things to be done in a particular way, you get reminded of things like this. Kassinga, where were you? You know, how many times do you get to be asked, where were you when we were fighting, for example? Do you think events like this, as sad as they were, can be now used just to sort of silence the youth?
Thank you very much, Toivo. Of course, we represent a generation of enlightened youth, as you are saying. We are the WhatsApp generation, well known as Facebook generation. Many refer to us as the born frees.
Yes.
And that particular question of where were you, if we rephrase it better and say that they were the likes of Mihale Jambingana, Mandume and Mfayo, and Chief Hendrik Vedboy, Samuel Maharero. So when you throw it back, then it's perceived as an insult, but ideally it's the same, it's trying to narrate two different things and say, yes, I may have not been there at that particular point in time, but it doesn't take away my right to either advance or advocate for a specific agenda. So therefore, days such as Kassinga and events such as Kassinga must be commemorated in their true nature of what has happened, who was affected, and also how do we get closure as a country. Remember, for the past 31 years, the history in our country has been, of course, and it's known that history is told by the victor.
Yes.
And the history of the victor may be stretched and overstretched and may not reflect the true nature of what has happened. And many are times that we need to find one another. Instead of asking one another, where were you? We must be able to bring one another to the table, ensure that we are teaching the right history, and we are also advocating. And remember that as tragic as these events were, we need families that must get closure. So how do families get closure? By narrating the actual stories, but also making sure that even us who are not there can make reference to it proudly and say, hence of this action, we have been able to evolve and advocate and become who we are today. Because remember, there will be nothing that will change about our history. We'll forever be able to be contributing towards that history, sharpen our skills, sharpen our tools. Even when we need to face the enemy, we know exactly how we are facing the enemy based on the historic events that has happened.
Now, Dr. Nahas, they say, this generation is perpetually asking for your recusal, your generation, to recuse itself now from positions, go home. You were forced into retirement yourself just because you were not voted. You would have still been in office yourself.
No. I retired voluntarily in 2013. I left the government. I left.
No, but party politics, you were still active.
Yeah, party politics, I was active.
Yeah, so it's not about government, really. It's about, even the youth in SWAPO are saying, a person like yourself who is in the late 70s must vacate. Is that a call from this generation on how do we blend the inclusion of both sort of generation to meet each other halfway?
Well, I never heard people saying that we should meet, but if there is that call, we are ready, but still remain true civic citizens of the Republic and cadres of the true SWAPO party. That is our history, that is our heritage, and we have to defend and protect that.
But you're being disingenuous, former Prime Minister, if you're saying that you've never heard people saying, you hear this all the time, people saying, look, the golden oldies must eventually leave. As a matter of fact, the party, your party, and the government itself has actually aged because people are refusing to leave. Yourself, it had to take.
No.
In your case,
No.
In your case, it had to take a very serious.
No. Let us
Congress defeat for you to sort of
No,
get
the
into
Congress,
retirement.
the Congress defeat is democracy.
Yes. So if it wasn't for that, you would have still been in the office. SWAPO offices somewhere.
I'm ready to serve any time, but separate things. To say SWAPO has aged, it is not true. Perhaps the best way to describe that is that there has been revisionist tendencies within SWAPO. People trying to question the ideals, the original ideals of SWAPO. That is revisionism. It's not aging. These are revisionist tendencies, reaction tendencies from certain quarters of the party. But it does not mean that the party has aged. If you put a vibrant person there, you'll see the SWAPO party re-emerging like a phoenix out of the ashes of revisionism. And mobilize the people and put the people of Namibia together, including my young people from AR, to forge ahead with national transformation, growth, and progress. Yes.
Dimbulukeni, you guys, if I remember correctly, yourself and a group of others from your movement left SWAPO on 26 August last year. And it was just young people. Is there a particular reason that was the pattern, that it's just young people who sort of moved out and not old people? Did you feel threatened in SWAPO as younger people yourselves? What was the issue?
Since 2014, and of course the history tells how we were suspended, later expelled, we took the party to court to prove a particular reason and narrative that there is rule of law and administrative justice, Article 18 of the Namibian Constitution, which is particularly very important in how we administer offices. So it's also to just put a display and say, remember, if we had left the party without challenging that expulsion, it would have created a precedence where Southwest Africa can get to do whatever they want, whichever leadership it is. So we needed to go to court and prove to the young people in the Namibian nation that, of course, we are guided in this country, even if the Constitution is called a piece of paper. But we are saying that the Constitution remains the supreme law. Henceforth, we took the party to court so that we set a precedence and say administrative justice and natural justice is very important. And we must uphold those principles. So secondly, since 2014, our hearts and minds, and remember when we were growing up, you are nurtured into the Southwest African culture. And that is your party, that is how you must grow. You are young people will take over. But as you grow, you begin to see that there's a bigger picture beyond Southwest Africa. So Namibia as a country is more important for us to make sure that we are fixing this country.
Just for context quickly, so Southwest Africa that is being referred here is your party?
No, there's no party called Southwest Africa.
So
that is,
we'll give a context to
that is like calling Jembera another name.
Okay.
So we are saying that, of course, once we have dealt with that aspect in fixing Namibia, and remember that since 2014, particularly in the housing market, things became uncontrollable. Politicians were giving land to one another. The ordinary Namibian was never respected. So somebody had to stand up to raise awareness and say, even the meme who sells kapana, even the security guard, must be counted in the whole sector as a country. Because remember, when you manage a party, you may see things at a micro level, but there's a macro aspect of managing the nation in general. So when we left Southwest Africa on the 26th of August, and we say Southwest Africa because the people, which is the young people, left. Ideally, it was a group of young people, over 500, that left on that particular day. So when the people left Southwest Africa, it is to say that we are concentrating on a bigger picture and say, leave the small things of petty politics of who wants to take a government job or who wants to go into parliament or who wants to become the next councillor. But there is a greater aspect and a greater need of why politics is created, which is to meet the people's need at the point of need. There is a reason why people left this country and they went into exile. There's a reason why people crossed dead bodies. There's a reason why Kassinga survivors continued to fight. There's a reason why those that were, and we are still investigating how many Namibians were at Kwitokwana Valley, and say those of them that were there, there's a reason why they continued even after. So we are simply just saying that those true, genuine qualities of why Namibians must exist and coexist, we must go back to those values. And we as a generation feel that, remember, there is an incomplete project of the liberation. That is why we cease to exist, to complete the incomplete project. Because remember, they said we went to fight for our land. Some went to fight because they couldn't get tea at 10 o'clock. Okanlongo. So they had to go fight just to have Okanlongo. But others went to fight because they were being oppressed. So ideally we are saying that we need to be that generation that must give a contribution to say, yes, we have political and flag independence. But remember, we must wage a struggle against economic emancipation, where it must require a certain skill set that wants to advance. And unfortunately, reality has it and generation has it. Some of those that are in political arena are in the sunset of their lives. What more can they contribute? They've contributed when they're in the early morning of their lives.
I hear you. So you were not just, because how you are perceived also is that you are just unruly young people who can't wait for their time to take over the reins of the parties and governments, that you are trying with this departure from the party, the leaving the party is your way of basically taking a shortcut towards the top. What do you say to that?
Never. Because remember, it has taken 6 years to add the 5th site of struggle to our struggle as young people. We've been at the forefront of protest action. We've been at the forefront of public discourse. We've been at the forefront of court action. We've been at the forefront of ensuring that even when it was critical, a decision was being passed in this country, where a person within a political party, which is Southwest Africa, in the think tank, was being imposed to us as Namibians to be the prosecutor general. So we needed to take a stand and say, no, that's not how things operate. Why is it that we are unable to find a prosecutor general that must be subjected to public interviews? So those are the aspects that we are bringing in to say, we are a generation that is, of course, maybe in the hurry to get things done, may not use the old tactics. Of course, this evolution, we are talking about the 4th industrial revolution, and as a country, we are not even prepared. So, so somebody must take that step. It's not taking a shortcut, but we are ideally advancing and showing that things have changed and they are no longer the same.
I hear you. Before we go on a break, just why do people, my previous question earlier, where do you blend the two generations and make each one of them feel part of the agenda?
Well, all of us were youth. The one point in time, in the early 60s. We were just as radical as them.
And you were never harassed? You were never subjected
We were harassed. That's why we left the country.
No, you were harassed by the oppressors, not by your own elders within the system.
Well, yes, I know. But I will not elaborate on that. Young people will always have certain ideals. Some are realistic, some are not realistic. You just need to understand them. That's how young people react to things. Having been around for some time, you have hit your head against a wall, this way and that way, and you have learned your lessons. But it doesn't mean that other people have also learned your lessons because they were not there. So perhaps it's a question of understanding that phase of being a young person, of being idealistic, of being dynamic. Perhaps that is where we are missing the point. I have no problem with what the young people are saying, AR or whoever. I know it is their time to say so. Yes.
When we come back, I would ask you, Honorable former Prime Minister, to tell us what is different from your youth days in the political space compared to what you are seeing now in the political space.
Fine.
We'll be back after this break. Welcome back. We are continuing with our conversation, of course, with former Prime Minister Nahas Angula here and Dimbulukeni Nauyoma from the affirmative repositioning movement. They were both in one political party at one stage, but now they are not. So, former Prime Minister, my question before the break was, why is it that if you have lived the experience of being a young person with ambitions, especially political ambitions, why is it difficult to understand nowadays young people when they display the same kind of behaviors?
I suppose you are asking why the system, why the party, why the leadership. You are not asking Citizen Angula.
No, okay, so I mean...
Citizen Angula had no problem with young people.
Yeah, but I mean you were...
I have no problem with them.
Yes.
When they started to repossess the land or whatever, they wanted to do there to make a statement. Their case came to the Central Committee. I was there. The agenda was to expel them. And I said, what happened to nature and justice? My other colleagues started to condemn me. I said, well, I believe in justice. If these people have done something against the party, they should come to explain themselves.
Yeah.
Why did they do that? And you have children, I have children, we know. Sometimes you call them around. When they do something wrong, we say, next time, don't do a thing like this.
Yeah.
If we have an issue, bring it up so that we can see how we can address it. But obviously, AR wanted to make a statement. And everybody knew that. But still, due process of law was supposed to take place. That's why they went to the court, they embarrassed the party. It was unfortunate. And the party was left with no alternative but to accept them back. And at their own time, they decided they are going to leave. That's also their right. It's democracy after all. So I have no problem with them as a person.
Yeah.
But obviously, as a party, we didn't follow the proper procedures. That's why the court could not see it this way, but to stand for justice.
To stand for justice.
Yeah.
Now, why? Well, I know you explained it a little bit earlier to say, you know, when you reach a particular age, you can no longer perform certain functions properly. But a person like Nahas Angula is a citizen. His rights to political activity and ambitions are guaranteed in the Constitution. Why do you seem to have, as an organization, as a movement, why do you seem to have very serious fundamental issues with being led by old people?
See, tell you what, the political system has created an entry point, but has never created an exit point. The youngest cabinet member in 1990 was 36. The following one was 37. That was former Minister of Home Affairs, Dimbulukeni Nauyoma. The youngest was Marco Osiku. Now, even at independence, there was no young person in cabinet. Now the problem became that for as long as you are under 50, and because of this generational gap, I can tell you now, even my eldest sister, who is 46, my mother would see her as a youth, but she has surpassed the youth age with close to 11 years. But for as long as the person was younger than you, would forever be perceived as a youth. But remember, we are saying young people between the age of 18 to 35. So this age group, for as long as you can remember, for 31 years, somebody must demonstrate to us and say how many of them have been in cabinet.
Yeah.
So this issue of saying youth are the future of tomorrow or the leaders of tomorrow, there is no training ground. Because remember, when you say young person is a leader of tomorrow, a young person at 31 is married and has a house, a household, just like the 70-year-old, just like the 60-year-old. Then become different in a political arena. Let's take an average age of 36 that entered cabinet in 1990. That person by now would have an MBA or a PhD, would be a CEO of a company with practical experience. But ideally, when they came back from exile, many of them went to school. It's a good thing because others needed to go and acquire skills and not just be freedom from the barrel of a gun. So to administer the country. But why is it now difficult to hand over to people who are learned, people who understand the economy, people who understand the political system? Of course, we know what has happened, or we've read of what was happening in exile. And the fear of saying that there would be retaliation between the young and the old. But if the young is properly nurtured, and is given the baton, look at what President Geingob is doing. Patience is 22. She has entered parliament. It's a good thing. But her entering parliament, what are her functions and functionaries for the next 5 years? Because remember, if she's a backbencher for the next 5 years, in the political system, if she doesn't buy favors, and we know how SWAPO operates, Southwest Africa. So if she doesn't buy favors, she may not even make it after 2022, if she's not in the Central Committee or Politburo. So she may not make it to parliament after that. So do you take it as a gimmick, or do you take that the president is serious about young people? So if you are creating room for young people to enter parliament at a younger age, Emma as well. So if you are taking these young people to parliament at a younger age, what is the path that you have nurtured to make sure that after 5 years, from being a deputy minister, she becomes a full minister? Or she has a significant role to play. And it's not just one. It must be a quota of young people. Because for as long as there's no quota system in the country, and for as long as the young people are told, you are too young, go to school, you are too young, do this, wait for politics later, because it has become a culture for us to be politically active at the age of 60 and above. Some sort of retirement package. Look at how many councillors we have and those that are in the National Assembly. So you begin to see that we have a fundamental problem because there is no room to groom, there's no room to pass on the baton. anything that you want, you must fight for it. You demonstrate that I can do this, you demonstrate that you can do that, but ideally, until there is a specific thing that you do, only then many would say, oh yeah, but they are right, but they are still young.
I hear you. You had some disagreement. What did he say that you don't agree with?
No, the generational war is a very interesting war because nobody is stationary. Yeah. The other day, Mayor Mpanda was commenting upon the National Youth Service having brought some young ladies here and to go and assert themselves. And he started by saying, I'm happy I'm not young anymore. I'm not a youth anymore. So nobody is going to be stationary there. Yeah. You might see another guy there as being an obstacle, but next time other people are going to see you as an obstacle. Yeah. So to me, generational wars are not real. Yeah. Let us talk about serious things. The serious thing is how much commitment do we have to serve the people of Namibia, to promote the public good, yes, rather than saving ourselves. These are the key questions we have to ask. How much competence do we have to perform certain duties? You know, people now are talking about meritocratic governance. Go to China there. That's the song there. The Chinese Communist Party looks at competence, at merit. That is what we have to try to infuse in our administration if we want to make progress. I have seen young people coming to parliament, sit there, does not even have an idea how to read a bill, or does not even define, I'm in parliament to defend this particular point, this particular issue.
But that is not just limited to young people. There are old people there that can't even read.
Yeah, old people you can understand. Where they came from bad education. This was, I'm saying, old people you can understand. I'm not saying that the current system of selecting people to go to parliament is perfect. I'm not saying that. I am saying in selecting your people to go to parliament, make sure that competence matters. Yes. Whether this is an old or a young person. Otherwise, people go there, start reading newspapers, start looking at cartoons in their cell phones, and all this kind of thing.
We've seen older people.
Old people also do that.
We've seen them looking at porn sites.
Yeah, well, old people also do that. But that's not supposed to happen. This is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Whether you are old, you are young, you are there as a representative of the electorate. You are supposed to defend their interest. You are supposed to push their agenda. I hear you. That is supposed to happen.
But that is the question that I have for you again now. To say, you were Prime Minister for nearly 10 years. And of course, among other positions in government. And you've been a Central Committee member as well, probably Politburo also, I'm not sure about that one. And there are certain cultures, bad cultures that thrived during your time in there. I'm referring to the meritocracy thing that you spoke about. How many people were deployed in key government positions on the basis of simply being card-carrying members of SWAPO and not because they necessarily had the skill? These things thrived under your leadership as a collective, of course, not you alone.
Well, I admit those things happen. That's why we are in the current political situation. People gave us a mandate, two-thirds majority, over time. and we became unresponsive to the people's needs. We became arrogant, you know, and we are not listening to the needs of the people. So these young people saw this, that these people are living in their own world. They are not with the grassroots. That did happen. That's why we have the current situation. These young people, they may think that they are popular. They are not probably popular. People are just protesting. People vote for them under protest. Yeah. This is what is happening because we abused our majority as a party.
I hear you.
Yeah.
It's a good point to say that you are in this forefront of activism because people are just desperate and you happen to be just the closest alternative that they can go for. What do you say?
We reject popularity and we reject, and if you can see that in the revolutionary guide that we had released earlier by the activist-in-chief on the 1st of January, speaks against activists with a sense of self-exaggerated self-importance. To say that you think that you enter the political space, you have 500 people close to you, and therefore you are now popular and you thrive on that popularity. Remember that the affirmative repositioning movement, first and foremost, speaks to ideological grounding. Why? We have learned that everybody else jumps with a wave for the sake of jumping with a wave. If there is anything that me and Citizen Nahas can agree on, there is a crisis of leadership in the country. There is crisis of leadership from young to the old. Who's to be blamed? Maybe we'll apportion it later. But we are not in the business of a popularity contest. We are in the business of ideological grounding to mold young people that for as long as we are on the Twitter generation, you mustn't tweet for clout to get popular likes and retweet. But you tweet sense. Even if you get one retweet, somebody is going to listen and think about what you've said. So substance and context is very important. That is why the organization in itself says we have two identical things that we take very serious. We must be able to provide information to young people. And after providing that information to young people, you must create and give inspiration. Why is it that we are at the forefront of public discourse? It is because that once you educate the people, once you are able to educate the people, remember education also, we may miss it at some point. You can have a PhD holder and remember that the quota of academics we have in this country is generally increasing. But what is their level of debate to public discourse? It's next to nothing. Why? Because somebody acquires a master's degree, a PhD, and they sit at their house. Or merely you have now these professionals who just go to work and go home. Yeah. And they don't take charge in the public discourse. So ideally, ours to take charge of public discourse is to give ideological grounding. And say even a security guard may have some certain level of education and can contribute towards shaping society. That is why we, in fact, in our Facebook, we speak about awakening a generation. It's not popularity, awakening a generation. Because we had a sleeping generation. Now they realize that the country is moving. This Viva Viva politics is not taking anybody forward. It's singing songs and dancing and just getting tenders behind the closed doors. So we are now, in fact, saying that we need to guide the country. We need to ensure that we are amending and fixing the mistakes of political and flag independence as we march towards emancipating ourselves economically, and genuine economic emancipation in our lifetime.
Now, again, former Prime Minister,
a citizen. I'm a civic citizen now. Yeah, the former is history.
Former is history now.
Yeah.
Okay. As someone who cares for your movement still, your political party, you want it to emerge out of its current staggerings and everything. When you listen to people like him, what kind of guidance do you give to those in your party of his generation as a counterattack to this? What is it that SWAPO must do, especially its youth? Because these guys, they have emerged out of nothing, and we've seen them taking certain positions in society. It's not about positions, but I'm just saying that they have earn themselves a particular level of respect. And you've alluded to it earlier to say that it's partially because young people, because not necessarily because they are doing anything better, but they are just maybe slightly better than your own party. What kind of counsel are you giving to your party to emerge and counter this new generation?
You know, when I was a Minister of Education, and I'm proud about this generation, I used to promote the concept of learning with understanding. These guys went through that education, and they are understanding things. What is destroying our liberation movement is greedy. People, many of the young people, old people too, join SWAPO not because of its ideals, but because of material benefit. It's not supposed to happen that way. We are supposed to join SWAPO because we believe in its ideals to serve the people, to contribute to the public good. That's supposed to be the message. But now, if people come there because they want to benefit, they want to have a certain advantage, then of course eventually we end up with fish rot. Because that's why it's like people used to go to CDM. You go there because you want to get rich, so every time you are finding ways of trying to see whether you can get a diamond here and hide it somewhere, even swallowing it. Because that was your purpose.
That was your purpose.
Yeah, now people come to SWAPO with that kind of CDM mentality. If you want to get rich, go to SWAPO.
I hear you.
Yeah.
We'll come back after this break and then continue in our last stretch of the show. We are back with the agenda, of course, and we are now getting into the last stretch of the show where I'm talking to former Prime Minister Nahas Angula. He doesn't want me to call him former Prime Minister. Apparently that is in the past now. He's just Citizen Nahas Angula. And then, of course, Dimbulukeni Nauyoma of the Affirmative Repositioning Movement. Citizen, I want to kick off this last segment with you again. When we talk about fish rot, when you talk about all these things, these are a manifestation of something that has gone on for too long. So it's not that people only started joining SWAPO for tenders and all these things over the past, say, 7-10 years. It's a culture that slowly got entrenched into the party, and you, again, were part of that leadership. What is it that you guys did not do correctly to avoid that free fall that we are seeing now?
Well, some of us tried to keep the ideals of the party. that I'm not in a party because I wanted to get rich. If I wanted to get rich, I could have started working in 1973 when I finished my first degree in Zambia. I was offered a job by the Zambian government to go and work and to get money. I didn't do that. I went back to my party to get an assignment. Similarly, in 1975, I was sent to the United Nations to work for the Council of Namibia. I had an opportunity to become a permanent officer in the United Nations. I didn't do that. So, on the understanding that we have a mission, the mission first to liberate Namibia. But liberation of Namibia does not mean that the mission is complete. We have a historical mission to transform this country for the betterment of everybody. But it appears that some of the comrades had their own other missions. And it went on, as you said, gradually, until we came to the situation of what is now known as a fish rot. I was looking today at the State Finance Act, and I'm trying to understand how did the concept of government objective come up in relation to the State Finance Act, which requires that all the monies should first of all go into the State Finance Fund. And the Parliament must authorize that money to be used somewhere. How come a government company was authorized to dish out money without parliamentary approval, if it is money which is meant for public purpose? I'm still trying to understand it. To me, it is strange. But you realize that some of these things are created to create loopholes for things like fish rot to happen. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
So, Dimbulukeni, you are now, your movement is represented on the Windhoek Municipal Council. The mayor is from your movement. You are the head of caucus, the AR caucus in the city of Windhoek. How are you finding the duties bestowed upon you as a movement? Of course, you are in a coalition with others. You have a pending case where you were arrested for trying to defend a woman whose house was being destroyed by City of Windhoek. Last week, there were 36 people arrested in Windhoek, including small children, for, I think, illegal land occupation. How did things turn this way? That somehow a council that is now led by the movement that was being harassed for this is somehow now harassing, I don't want to call it harassment, but it's now at the forefront of actually moving people like that.
Yeah, well, Toivo, first and foremost, I don't speak for the city of Windhoek, but there's his own PRO and all other things. But as an activist of the affirmative repositioning movement, we must understand that we're in a period of transition. A period of transition where, of course, myself, I'm still challenging, and as a movement, we are challenging the Squatters Proclamation Act. It remains a tool at the disposal of the city, irrespective that whether Toivo is in charge today or whoever is in charge tomorrow. Yeah. If you have followed closely to council meetings, there are efforts that are being created to somehow find a better option of what must happen is to when somebody occupies land or when somebody is seeking to be assisted. Remember in the second, if not the first, the second council meeting has resolved a standing council resolution on how to help people on humanitarian grounds. What that means is that if Toivo happens to live in a corrugated iron sheet and there are 20, it becomes inhabitable for people. So we must be able to find a modality in which how Toivo can approach the city to be able to be assisted. There is 100,000 people are in need of housing, particularly in the city. Over 90,000 of those live in the informal settlement. So these are realities that we knew when we entered this fifth sites of struggle, which is the elections. We don't control the city, of course, 100%, but we can influence in the decision making because we have representation. So our position remains the same, to say that, remember, there may be a Gary Shikesho at City of Windhoek who does not believe, and in fact they are about the guys who are at community development who are supposed to be helping people. In fact, many of them are saying, no, go to your mayor to help you. How does the mayor take the duty of a community development officer at the city? So those are some of those rotten apples that we want to get rid of in the city. It's either they transform to know that things have changed and that there's a new sheriff in town. We do things by the book and we do not oppress the people. Because remember, sometimes it's the officials themselves, because they belong to Southwest Africa and because they are unable to wake up to the realities of change. We must be able to be
If you are saying they belong to Southwest Africa, meaning SWAPO,
so
SWAPO is the people and the people are SWAPO.
it used to be a notion, but of course, there are still others who are there. So Southwest Africa with its people still have a specific way of administering things. So, of course, it will take us some time. And we know that the agency is there, and we have done greatly so far in ensuring that the city must not be an oppressive city. The rule at city police will change. Because city police is not just about giving people traffic fines. It's not just about arresting people. It must be about engaging the community. Remember the relations right now between the community and residents of the city and the city police is a hostile one. And the leadership, and I'm informed that is working very hard to ensure that we create a working relations with the people. Remember that we can even, in fact, to ease traffic in Windhoek, one of the things that we can do, which is easy, is turn Florence Nightingale into a one-way street in the morning and also in the evening, so that majority of our people utilize that road to access to the CBD. So how many people come from the CBD to using that road in the morning, if you think about it generally? So you can kill that congestion in one go. So there are ideals to say, how do we work together with the people? And remember, there's a perceived perception. Just because that Francina Kahungu, Southwest Africa Councillor, was mayor yesterday, and she had given your queries to Francina Kahungu yesterday, it does not mean automatically when Job Ampanda becomes mayor tomorrow, he has the whole information. So it's a standing office, yes, with that we take cognizant of. And we must go through whatever was in the office, what requires agency, and how do we make sure that we deliver. And it's not just about the affirmative repositioning movement, but it's a collective of the progressive forces and say, we have found 25 challenges, when and how do we address them? But of course, the squatters proclamation is being dealt with immediately because it's a tool and it's a law that, of course, some sections have already been dealt with already. And very soon you'd hear and follow when we go to court, and hopefully we'll have it repealed and our people would have freedom.
So briefly, before I go back to the citizen Nahas Angula, if a situation emerges today, if the events of Okirangaba, was it Okirangaba where you got arrested?
Yes.
If the events of Okirangaba re-emerge today in exactly the same manner and fashion that it occurred during that time, how would you deal with that situation of somebody who just puts up a house as if it's just some bush? It's a city which is supposed to have a particular order of events. How would you deal with that?
In fact, before we get the true story of the 33 or 34 with children, they were not even arrested on site. They went to look for their material because the material was taken. Then only after they were arrested. So that case, you would now want to know what had happened actually at the station when they went to collect these things, this material, because the city police has not arrested them there on site. So what would we do if a situation of that caliber happens now? Remember that the council meeting of Thursday was speaking about street committees. in how the city's leadership can be in touch directly with the people on the ground, not through this, what is known with Southwest Africa communities that have been in place. But you find a new modality that you
What
have
is this South Africa community?
you have direct impact with the person on the ground. And where us, if we are in one nation, we have 5 representatives, they have a say and they communicate to the city and say, and these councillors who are tasked those constituencies, and say Councillor X, in fact for Tobias Ainyeko should be Sam Nahoma Jr. So he would be then tasked by these guys to say, this is our report. We are having this, how many corrugated iron sheets houses here, and this open space here. How do we speak to the city to avail this land to us in order for us to set up our houses? Remember, it's a process of services, and it's a process of us making sure that even with the formalization project of the city, how do we make sure that by the end of this financial year, their financial year which starts in July and ends in June next year, so how do we make sure that in their first financial budgeting period, they have centered around the essence of housing? The current months, and we were discussing it the other day, and say the local authority's financial system must also have to be tied with the elections. Because remember, you are coming into an office with expectations. Of course, maybe you are given time to settle in, but how do you implement your budgets efficiently and effectively? It will be shocking for you to know that there has not been capital budgets allocated to sports in the city for the past 4 years. It's nothing but mere political fights that are in the city. So you need to iron out, how do you, and rightly what the citizen Nahas is saying, how do you remove politics away from the public good and say, we were elected to serve the people. And many of the politicians, unfortunately, do not sink that message. And it becomes a challenge. I just wanted shortly to contribute and say, it's not just fish rot. Remember that GIPF was first than fish rot. And the comrades, as a new terminology known for eating, have always had a special way of covering themselves. Because let's look at the beneficiaries of GIPF, who administered this pension as it shifted from Sanlam to GIPF. So when you look at the late Aaron Mushimba and his close relations to Southwest Africa and the business arm that he was running and how he would facilitate that pension money of the people. So remember, it's not just about fish rot. Fish rot is a small thing. Or maybe it's big because it's now going into billions. But if we closely look at what has happened and transpired at GIPF, it would awaken many people and say, but this has been the culture at Southwest Africa.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, Citizen Nahas Angula, this young man here, when I was asking him about the arrest of 36 people, he's throwing around all sorts of defense mechanisms there. And maybe it's correct, I don't know. But I'm saying that are these young people now getting some sort of baptism of fire? Because it's always easier when you're outside to say, but Nahas is a prime minister and things are not happening under his leadership. But once Dimbulukeni becomes the prime minister and he finds they're going tough, then we ask him the tough questions. Then he says, but you see, for us, now we are still working on the thing. Is this a case of young people now realizing that leadership is not as straightforward as it sounds from outside?
No, I think that is the challenge they have to address. They should just be creative in how to address that, and I'm happy to hear that they are trying to establish committees as a point of, communication. That's a good start, so that you are part of the people. A month ago, I was invited to go to Havana to support the Shack Dwellers Association through the Coste Foundation. We were sitting there, then my name, I was introduced, that I was around. I see people become excited, shouting my name. And the governor was there. She was also introduced. But for whatever reason, my name attracted their attention. And at a certain point, they came to me to ask for some donation here, food, what. You look at their face, these people are hungry. You look at their face, you can see these people are hungry. Now, these committees, I hope that they will also be proactive enough, for example, to work with community-based organizations, perhaps faith-based organizations, talk to the vulnerable broke of this world and say, when your vegetables are 1 day before expiry, donate to us so that we have a soup kitchen in this locality. Because I saw there, I was so embarrassed. People are hungry. And I hope that the municipality will take it. I actually suggested that African society is based upon solidarity. And we got our independence because of solidarity. Why don't we, for the solidarity purposes, just impose for every house owner in Windhoek a $100 to support organizations like shack dwellers, or to support, orphans or people who are so hungry. It can make a difference. But that requires initiative, that requires imagination, it requires innovation. And I hope that with their approach, people to people, I think it will go a long way to open up lines of communication so that people understand their limitations, and they also understand the challenges that people are faced with. I think that's the way to go. But before I conclude, I would like to say the 4th of May is Kassinga Day. We are going to commemorate the 53rd anniversary of this tragedy. And I hope that on that day we will introspect and say that having gone through all these difficulties, whether you are talking about the Hamakaris, Konjira, or the Dimba, Krasberg, whatever it is part of our history. Tragic it is, it should bring us together.
Indeed. The last throw of the dice is with you, Mr. Nauyoma. When a young person is involved in the revolutionary struggle that you are involved in, as AR and as young people fighting for your own path, how do you spend a day like how would you spend a day like 4th of May?
Of course, as we tap from the wisdom of Frantz Fanon, that each generation, ideally, out of relative obscurity, we must define our mission to either fulfill it or betray it. Yeah. Ours is economic freedom. And the 4th of May, ideally, with some previous discussions, it's not just about, when I spoke about the narration of our history, it looks like most of the public holidays that we have are only linked to the armed struggle, but nothing else before. So we must be able to fill in or find a day. We utilize even the 4th of May to commemorate tragedies that has happened before the armed struggle, and be able to say, how do we, as a generation, learn from what has happened? How do we build from that? So we commemorate it by educating ourselves, number one. Because education is the key to success. But after you attain that degree, the locks have been changed. So we must now study the model of how to get a new key to open the door that has been locked. So we spent that day tapping into and feeding the brain, and of course, having an ideological position with our moral compass. So ideally for us, the 4th of May must be a day that all Namibians find sympathy with one another. You must do good to your neighbor. Citizen Nahas was just saying it and say, maybe it's a day that we must find, just what they do with Mandela Day, that you do good to your neighbor. Find a community that is in need of anything. Offer what you can, but we must be able to train our people to move away from dependency syndrome and find a way in which we can move forward. But as a movement, we will continue to inform and inspire the young people of this country as we chart the way forward in actualizing economic freedom in our lifetime.
Thank you, Mr. Nahas, for coming to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
Very well.
Right Honorable. You don't want to be called Right Honorable, but thank you very much.
Thank you for having us here.
Yeah, we appreciate
It's a pleasure.
Yes, definitely. That is former Prime Minister Nahas Angula, of course, speaking, engaging in a conversation with myself and Dimbulukeni Nauyoma of the AR movement about what some people may see as generational conflict or transitions between generations of our country. Thank you for watching and good night.